Hey Sun Space Sun, I'm Daisy Victoria. Today we are going to make a super fun medieval inspired dress. Now I know I haven't been super active on here for a while, and that's because I am transitioning and going through training right now in a very grown-up job using my very grown-up college degree. I am really excited about a whole new journey in life. Obviously, I am still going to be creating content. It's just going to be a little bit slower, especially for right now. So for this dress, what I want to do is, well, I was inspired, first of all, by this fabric that I was the lucky recipient of at a cosplayer's fabric swap. I think it has that gorgeous medieval royalty feeling to it, and I'm also going a little more toward using more darker colors and more blacks in my garb because I wear a lot of black in real life, and I tend to not wear a lot of black in my medieval garb. This fabric, in fact, reminds me of a lot of the medieval royalty outfits that you see in artwork, and I thought it would be a really fun one to play around with. In this project, I am going to do a very basic medieval dress, which I've shown you guys some basic medieval dresses before, primarily following my underdress tutorial that I have available as a PDF and as a video. So this is going to be similar to that, but a little bit different. So it's going to be rectangular construction with triangles, just like that one. A lot of the later period medieval dresses that are worn as a main outer gown have more gores in them than what I used in the underdress tutorial. So I will also be putting gores in the front and back as well as the sides. That's the main difference. The rest of the differences are really decorative design choices. Recently I've been looking into Viking Age Norse clothing, and I guess slightly after Viking Age as well. So this book, Woven into the Earth, is a wonderful resource for that. This is my library book, but now that I have a real grown-up job, I do intend to purchase a copy for myself that I can keep forever as well. This book is specifically based on the Greenland finds. And a lot of people I've heard talk about the Greenland gown. I know if you're not in the historic costuming or reenacting niche, it's oh yeah, oh, sure, a lot of people talk about the Greenland gown. Yeah, okay, so in the niche, a lot of people do. It's a thing. So anyway, there's lots of garments in here. So for example, here's some of the photos that you can see in this book. The publisher of this book should sponsor me and give me a free book, by the way, just putting that out there. So yeah, anyway, there's many pages of this type of all sorts of information about the garments, the fabrics, and all of that good stuff in here. So what I intend to do is take a couple of these dresses into account and sort of just do a really basic medieval dress. And that's exactly what I'm going to do with a basic rectangular construction and gores at the front, back, and sides of the skirt, as well as gussets under the arms. I am considering doing maybe a specific recreation of a dress in here at a later date. But for now, we're going with a very basic standard one. Anyone could probably follow this tutorial, and you don't have to do all the decorations or anything. You could just baseline hem the dress and finish it, but I'll show you what I'm gonna do. So I love decorations, and hello, super shiny, amazing fabric is already decorative, but this is for a royal medieval person, so we gotta make it fancier. It just so happens that I have some leftover pieces of this diamond patterned Dupioni silk, and I am going to use this to do a neckline facing as well as cuffs on the sleeves. I'm going to use some gold cord to accent that, and from one of my many boxes of gold colored bedazzles, very technical terms here. I'm going to use some little leaf sequins, or little metal leaves, I guess, to decorate it some more. So that is the plan. It's going to be very elven, very fairy-like, which is very me. What's also cool about this is that I plotted out a layout of this dress using only 3 yards of fabric. And that's cool because this is a limited amount and I don't really have enough for like a big 5-yard dress. But I do have enough for a 3-yard dress. The specific patterning that I'm using is very fabric efficient because it's all rectangles and triangles. Now, I want you to keep in mind that one, this fabric is 54 inches wide, so if you have a less wide fabric, it would take more fabric. Also, I'm only about 5'4", so if you're taller, you might need more fabric because you might want it longer. And also, I'm like size small or so if you want a wider dress, you also will need a little more fabric. You know, keep that in mind. Maybe at a later time I will go through and like calculate out more of like a pattern base for different sizes. But just now for fun, just this week, I wanted a fun project in between all the work training. So if you're just going off of this video, just keep that in mind. You might need like 4 yards. So I'd say this is like a 3 to 4 yard project. All right, so I'll show you kind of my little layout here. So it's all right there for you. You can just pause if you want to look more closely. So basically I have 2 body pieces, front and back. I have 2 sleeves that are going to taper down toward the wrist. I have 2 gussets that go under the arms. And then I have 4 triangles for the skirt, but to be efficient in the fabric, I'm cutting them out from the lower portion here. This is actually the same way that I cut the triangle gores for other dresses too. The difference is I don't always put one in the front based on the cut of a different skirt style, which is a whole different geometry thing. So anyway, don't worry too much about that. Just that this is a good way to cut gores. 3 of them are going to be exactly triangles and 2 of them are going to be half triangles from the sides. And that's okay. I will just put those in the back, so there will be 1 extra seam in the back. That's exactly the same thing that I've done before with my Norse apron dress. If you watched that video, I also cut 4 gores in a similar manner and just sewed 2 of them together. From here, you're mostly going to just watch me do it. I will tell you ahead of time a couple things I'm going to do here. So in the front and back, I'm going to cut in, and then I'm going to place one of the triangular gores in there. And in the front, I'm going to cut a little neckline with a little keyhole. When I get to kind of the end of the tunic, if you're making one yourself and you just want a base tunic, you can just hem the edges like I've shown you before in tutorials for simpler garments. Or you can get some inspiration to totally bedazzle and decorate. So this tutorial will also show you how to create a decorative neckline on a medieval tunic and some cuffs for the sleeves. All right, so what I've done here is I have cut 2 pieces of the fabric. So this one is 44 inches long. If you look back at the drawing here, it says 40 inches, but I figured I'd give myself a little bit of extra room to play with just in case. And this one is 60 inches long, and I'll show you how I got those measurements. The 60 inches comes from the length from my shoulder to the hem plus like enough fabric to hem the dress. So I simply measured from the floor up to my shoulder and then added a couple of inches so that I could hem it. And I added enough for a pretty generous hem. The same thing for the other piece of fabric. It is from the floor up to where I want to insert my gores. So I want to insert them probably at 42 inches actually, but I've cut to 44. That worked out with the repeat of the pattern in the fabric, and I can always cut some off if I don't need the full length. The 44-inch piece is going to be cut entirely into triangles to be gores. The 60-inch piece is going to be cut into 2 panels, which are 60 inches long, and their width is wide enough to go around my full bust. So I measure my bust and divide that in half, and you can add a little bit of seam allowance. You also want to make sure that this is at least as wide as your shoulders. So if your bust is smaller than, or half your bust is smaller than your shoulders, then you still want to make sure it's wide enough to go across the shoulders. It is okay if it's wider than the shoulders. You can just take up that extra in the length of the sleeves. So at least for this basic one. There are other medieval tunic cuts that can tailor that a little differently, but for this one it's super basic, and it should work just with tweaks to things like the sleeve length, the size of the underarm gores, and stuff like that. So the closer you cut these rectangles to your bust size, and the smaller you make the underarm gussets and the thinner you make the sleeves, the more fitted it's going to be. But it's not going to be super fitted. That is not the goal of this one. To get the length of my sleeves, I just measure the length of my arm. Again, add hem. To get the width, this depends how wide you want your sleeve, but you know, like that. And if you want it smaller around your wrist, measure there. For the underarm gussets, I typically do them anywhere from 3x3 squares to 6x6 squares. And this one I'm doing them as 4x4. And I think that works usually pretty well for myself for a fairly fitted dress. Now remember, it's not super fitted, it's not like supportive or anything like that. All right, so at this point I have sewn the shoulder seams of the garment. I also went ahead and sewed that one gore that was cut in the two halves together. And it's not going to come until a little later, but I did start working on the sleeves, so I'm going to insert that when I get to it. What I've also done is I've started cutting in half the lower portion of the front and the back, because I am going to be setting a gore in there. Now with the neckline, here's a little trick. Now if we go ahead and finish this off and then add our neckline facing later, that's totally fine. We can totally do that. And if I'm just doing like a little row of trim, that's what I'll do. But this time I want to make a big piece that goes on there out of another fabric. And it's easiest to go ahead and cut it out now and go ahead and finish off that neckline first. The reason is, look at all this free motion we have to work with. Once this tunic is finished, there's going to be sleeves here. This is going to be sewn down. We're going to be working with a whole lot more constraints, whereas right now, big, free flowing. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this sewing machine aspect of the neckline right now. And the reason I say sewing machine aspect is because I do want to do some hand decorations on it when I'm done, and I don't have to do those yet. So if you're not decorating your neckline, you're just making an easy peasy tunic, you don't have to worry about this part at all. You will simply hem, fold under and hem your neckline, and that's good. You can always do a facing turn toward the inside if you want, so I'm going to turn my facing to the outside and make it decorative. Another option, so option number 3, is to do what I'm doing but in reverse, so it looks clean here but you have a hole facing underneath. Alright, so I got those cut out. I have the neckline piece and I have the cuffs for the sleeves, and those are just cut tracing around the opening where they're going to go. Next, I have sewn that neckline facing onto the neckline of the dress or tunic. I sewed it onto the wrong side, so like this, with the wrong side up and wrong side up. So if you get a little confused about how to do it, get mixed up, just kind of slow down and think about how it's going to turn, okay? So it goes on with the wrong side, so the right side of this facing the wrong side of your tunic. And then, so I clip the curves too, because you want to clip the curves to make them turn easily and iron. So you're gonna turn it over, and now look at that. The right side is up on top of the right side of my tunic. Now you can make a neckline facing whatever shape, whatever style you like. This is just the general way to put it on. After this, there's a number of ways to finish it off too. Oh, and by the way, if you wanted to do that other type where the facing is on the inside, just swap it. Just sew it to the right side and flip it to the inside. And then the right side will look like this. So what you want to do to finish this off is any type of hemming the edge. So the simplest thing you can do is just fold it under, stitch it down. This is what I've done many times on tunics in the past. What I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to take some of my cord and put it along the edge as well. Now I can do this right now or I can do it later, but it behooves me to go ahead and pin it down right now either way, because at this point, remember, I can still lay this part of the tunic flat, and that helps a lot. Okay, so next I have started with attaching the gores. Now the way this works is each gore is cut as a triangle, which means that the long diagonal edge is slightly longer than the center of it, and we want them to all be the same width or the same length. So what I've done is measure the length at the center of each triangle and then measure across to the sides and cut that much off so that it's curved at the bottom. So what I've done here is I've attached 2 side gores to the sides of the front. You could attach them to the sides of the back also, it doesn't really matter. The thing is, you're gonna attach them to the other side also, so you pick. I've also started to cut up here for the front gore. I like to kind of get the dress put together a little bit before I actually do the final cutting and insertion of those, just because I want to make sure that they're at the right height. Since this is kind of experimental, like I just now measured and did it, which maybe you're doing as well. There's just all these things. It's like risk analysis and how to mitigate any potential risks. Like you can go ahead and, okay, so because this fabric is patterned, I can follow the pattern easily, cutting up in the center. If you don't have a pattern fabric, you can simply fold it in half and cut up the center at any time, even when the dress is finished. Now, to get the sleeves into tubes, we basically are just going to sew as though it were a regular sleeve. So there's just this extra gore attached. We just sew it. We just kind of lay it over to the side and sew it. Okay, at this point I have inserted the side gores into the dress. This is at this point still the same as that other tutorial because we have not yet put in the front and back gores. So what we have left to do is we have to attach the sleeves. What I have left here at the top is bigger than what the sleeve is going to take up. So what I'm going to do is sew the sleeve on and then also stitch closed where I have sort of a side seam there above the gore. And then I am also going to insert the front and back gores. So I'm going to cut along the center line as far up as I need and sew those in there. The one other thing is, since I decided to do cuffs on the sleeves, I'm going to sew the side seams of those cuffs, and then I will be able to sew them onto the sleeves. So turn a sleeve right side out. This gold is luxurious. Look at that. So with the cuff, we'll have that on the end. Amazing. All right, so guess what? I have inserted all of the gores into my skirt. So the front gore is just inserted into that slit that I cut in the dress. What I did was I sewed one side of the gore first, right sides together here, and then I folded it over and sewed the other side. Now, if the very top of the gore is a little finicky for you, you can do a little hand stitching up there instead of doing the whole thing by machine, if that makes it a little easier for you. Also, don't be afraid to finagle it around with your machine and play with it and just kind of get a feel for it, because really you just kind of have to get a feel for it. And in the back here, you can see there is a seam down that gore, because that is the one where I cut the two right angle triangles and then sewed them together to get the same triangle as the other three. What I've also done here is I have attached one sleeve. I am going to attach the other sleeve and show you. So as you can see, there is this big opening on the other side of the dress, and that is where the sleeve is going to go. Minus, like, the sleeve isn't going to fill this whole thing, so right here I'm going to sew this shut like a regular side seam. So you can kind of see that on this side. Sleeve is attached, and this is the gusset in the sleeve, and then at this part I just sewed the side seam. Alright, so I've got both sleeves sewn on, and I have sewn on the cuffs also. So I did that just the same way that I did the neck facing. So I sewed this onto the inside of the sleeve so that I can flip it out like this and then turn it up on top of the sleeve like that. And just like I did with the neck facing as well, I'm going to fold this over, iron it, and stitch it down. Alright, so now the dress is technically finished. I did stitch down those cuffs. I also hemmed the bottom edge by folding over twice, ironing that and stitching it. A note too is that if you're following more as like a tutorial for yourself, you can also hem the ends of the sleeves by folding under twice, just like I did in the very similar underdress tutorial that I did a while back. And you can also do that for the neckline. So the facings are totally optional. Now this dress is not quite finished because I'm going to add some decorations. I'm going to add a little bit of this cord and my little metal leaves. You can choose to decorate things as much as you like, and I think that this one just needs even more shininess because you can't go wrong with more sparkle.